Hi everyone, welcome back to another reading slash guidance slash sharing session. I want to share why I'm doing this. I am currently going through a period of time where I feel the most insane that I've felt in a while. And I feel like a lot of people have been feeling a little crazy this week, and my friend told me last night that in the astrology, there's something about like planets like being conjunct in a way that creates this like predisposition for like mental like insanity and psychotic episodes and things like this. So if you've been feeling that, maybe this is for you, but if you also feel drawn to be here, then maybe this is for you as well. But usually when I do these, I just kind of like am living my life and I'll put out a prayer or a thought or a question of like, what is the wisdom in this moment right now? What do I need to know? What do I need to carry with me in like through these moments in order to, find an anchor? A lot of the time I feel like I look for wisdom to ground me as I, move through life. And I figure if I can share that with other people and support them through their, crazy lives, then, that's why I make these videos basically. So the first thing that came up that I wanted to share was this piece about following the thread. So if you understand that concept already, then great. But if you don't, what I mean is basically in life never stops moving. And because we're human beings and we have egos, we create attachments along our journeys. And sometimes the beliefs or the ideas or the experiences or the perspectives or whatever it is that we have attached ourselves to and used to orient ourselves in reality crumbles, and we feel insane, we feel crazy. And that chaos internally comes from, I think, just the nature that life changes constantly, and sometimes we really need to learn to let go and surrender. And how do we do that? How do we stay embodied? How do we stay grounded? How do we stay centered and peaceful throughout times where the foundation of our psyche is like crumbling and changing, or things are being uprooted, or when we're doing trauma work and we're excavating aspects of ourselves that have been with us for a lifetime up until today, up until now? How do we stay focused and grounded and in our peace when we're letting go of things that have literally shaped our reality till today? How do we do that? And these words coming out of my mouth are kind of surprising me, because I think sitting here in front of the camera and having the intention, I'm going to deliver wisdom, I'm going to deliver a message to you, it just somehow makes me pull up on these like places inside of me. And this is helping me also make sense of my inner world. So for some people, maybe that's a bit of advice that you can take with you, to be of service and to share your perspective, your depth, your intensity, whatever. One of the things that I like live with and qualities I have, I guess, is this depth and intensity. Like if you're into astrology, like I have Pluto in the first house in Scorpio, and it's literally going to be transiting all of my personal planets for the rest of my entire life until I'm like in my mid 80s. And if that made no sense to you, basically what that means is in astrology, when you're born, you have a chart, which is basically a snapshot of the celestial bodies and their locations in space relative to the Earth at the instant you were born, and the relationship of different planets with one another and the arc within the circle that they are in. and the positioning that they are in relation to one another, in relation to the earth, and the houses that they're in, as in like the segment of the wheel that they're positioned in, and the type of planet, like all of these things within astrology. If you don't understand astrology, which if you're watching this, I have a feeling that you might, but anyway, just to go into it a little more, all of that is basically like the foundational aspect of chart reading and astrology and stuff like that. So in my chart, Pluto is the planet that rules the sign of Scorpio. But Pluto is a planet of death and transformation. And it is in my first house. And the first house is the house of the personality, the self, the identity, how you filter the world, how you experience the world, how you face the world, and how people view you. So there's an energy of depth and intensity and power associated with Pluto. And because it's in Scorpio, that's like amplifying that energy of death and transformation and, you know, the back of the psyche, the deep psyche, the unseen, you know what I mean? So at the moment I was born, Pluto was positioned on the horizon in my first house. The first house, I think, is like right on the horizon. And so I have my personal planets, which are Sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, all of those are, and Saturn, all of those, and then the, you know, bigger planets, Jupiter, Uranus, all of those are in my, and Neptune, in my first 5 houses. So basically, from house 1 to 7, that is above the horizon. That is the daytime. That is illuminated consciousness. That is aspects of our personality, our outer worlds, how we exchange with relationships and life and the world. And then from houses 8, which is where Scorpio and Pluto naturally live, to 12, that goes into the subconscious, nighttime, below the horizon, secretive, hidden realms. So when you have planets in that portion, it can indicate qualities of yourself or your life that are maybe more unseen or more mysterious or more elusive or whatever. And there's so much more about this, but Pluto, the planet of death and transformation, was in my first house. And as I grew up and continued growing up and living life and whatever, Pluto is slowly moving from my natal chart through the rest of those initial houses, transiting all of my personal planets. So for example, right now in my natal chart, I don't know how to describe this, but in astrology, we have things called transits, and sometimes the way that planets are moving in space right now at any given moment, and the relationship that they have to the position that the planets were in during your exact moment of birth, when the planets in the sky right now move past, like if you overlap a map of the sky right now with your natal chart, and a planet in the sky right now moves past one of the planets in your natal chart, that's called a transit. And then there are other relationships like conjunctions and sextiles and trines and things like this, which is where the angle of the relation of the planets in the sky right now matches up with the planets in your natal chart in a specific way that creates a different set of qualities. So basically, this was a tangent to go into the death transformation kind of quality that I am kind of like feeding into and playing off of when I do these readings, and especially applies, I think, right now, because if you're watching this again, you could possibly be somebody who is enduring what feels like a death or a rebirth kind of process. And I'll tell you a story, because this is my version of the story. I was recently, and this is just a snapshot, mind you, there's so many other layers, but I was recently in a therapy session where I was excavating trauma and doing parts work. And if you don't know what parts work is, I would highly recommend just looking up a video on YouTube of what parts work is and how it works. It is life-changing and so essential, I think. to wholeness, achieving like cohesion, mind, body, soul, spirit, all that. So I was doing parts work, and I had a part come up that resurfaced in my psyche, because the concept of parts work, I think, applies to anybody who's endured a serious trauma and maybe hasn't recovered from it, or has gone through a thing and then, had their life changed and altered because of that. Because when we experience trauma, especially at certain times in our life, when the pain and the shock and the emotional experience and the psychological experience of that event is too much for the bandwidth of our sensory processing capacity and other capacities to process, then we experience something called fragmentation. And in shamanism, that's what the idea of soul retrieval plays off of. Soul retrieval is basically the process of calling back in the parts of ourselves, of our psyches, that left our bodies and weren't able to be processed through the body while we were going through that. So yeah, I am going to stop this video right here, pause my thoughts. Something came up, and so I will be back. So this is part 1, but watch part 2 for some actual tarot guidance. And I'm going to get more into what I mean when I talk about following the thread and surrendering, and go a little more into this like death process kind of thing. So I guess you can think of this video as kind of a backdrop to, or a precursor to, going a little deeper into some of this wisdom that I want to share. So I'll see you in part 2.